I've made it my mission to be able to like research so I can find the language to explain what I just experienced.
At this particular space, I was the only black female educator on top of it. I'm just too liberated for the shenanigans, but also, continue to fight in the ways that feel genuine and fulfilling for you.
Even if you feel like people don't deserve for you to be, like doing their dirty work, just do it for yourself. You'll feel so much lighter, honestly.
Change can start on many different levels. It doesn't necessarily have to be like you're the forefront of a movement to create change. Welcome back to Kwanzaa Unwrapped. Wait, that kind of rhymes. Mustard on the beat, ho. No. Welcome back to Kwanzaa Unwrapped. I'm Asmara, and this show is about challenging the status quo and highlighting people who are redefining Black culture. Today's theme is collective work and responsibility, but before we get into it, if you are not caught up on the series, make sure to check out the playlist. The first episode was a conversation on community building and belonging with creators Hariana Hook and X Mira Mira. Episode 2 was a conversation on identity, individuality, and authenticity as a creator in your 40s with Nard Villain and The Female Phenom. However, I don't only want to highlight content creators in this series, which leads me to our conversation today. Our first panel guest is Ilasiea Gray, who is an actress, educator, and multi-hyphenate social practice artist. My audience may recognize her as the voice of student activist Diamond Washington in the video game Life is Strange Double Exposure. Oh my gosh, girl, your braids is cute! Ilasiea began performing at a young age and has since gained ample experience in both stage and on-camera work with a passion for educational theater, projects with social justice themes, and theater for young audiences. Her internationally published essay, Why Are There No Great Kids of Color in the Performing Arts, examines inequity in the arts for young people and educators of color. As a dedicated advocate and leader, Ilasiea has directed over 30 youth productions throughout her career and also runs her own culturally conscious acting program for students pre-K through high school. Ilasia's impact and expertise has been featured in many publications and panels, including Colorado Public Radio and South by Southwest. She is also a True West Award recipient. Our next panel guest is Akua Daniella, who runs the YouTube channel Town of Towiah. She is on a mission to explore and celebrate intersecting identities within the Black community. Daniella got her start creating social commentary videos about identity and Black diaspora representation in film, TV, and other forms of media, quickly being recognized by prominent channels like Khadijah Bowe and Tiffany Berg for her insights. But Daniella's work to create space for underrepresented sections of the Black community hasn't stopped there. After dealing with some personal struggles which led her to seek an autism diagnosis, Daniella went on to create a not-for-profit community interest company called Neuro Noir that hosts social gatherings for Black neurodivergent women and queer people across the UK. I'm so excited to share how both Ilasiea and Daniella are using their work for the greater good. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation. Alrighty, so thank you guys so much for being here and welcome to day 3 of my Kwanzaa series. So today's theme is Ujima, which is the Swahili word for collective work and responsibility. And I've brought all of you here to kind of talk about the different ways that you're giving back to your community. And I feel like a lot of ways being the change that you seek. So I've told the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, what some of your achievements have been so far. But I'm also big in starting with an origin story and how who we were when we were young has kind of influenced who we are today. So I'll start with Ilasiea on this question and then we'll oscillate. But I'm curious, Ilasiea, we know you are an actress, an educator, a multi-hyphenate, everything. But what were you like growing up? What were your passions, your interests, your hobbies? Did you always want to be an actress? What was little Ilasiea like?
Oh my gosh. Apologies in advance. I'm a little under the weather, so just throwing that out there for our time together. But little Ilasiea was a blast. I think I was a very strange kid, but in the best way possible. I'm an only child, so was always fine with my own company. Yeah, I always wanted to be an actor. I knew that since age 6, and I think that's when I did my first school play. I was in kindergarten. And but yeah, hobbies, I loved to just create my own worlds, whether that was playing restaurant with my mom, or like even in my classrooms, I remember I had nicknames for every single person in my class, like in all of elementary school, and we still call each other those names. And yeah, just like getting into like anything. I loved gaming actually when I was young. I loved board games also. And
okay, what games did you play? I'm just curious.
Like board games or like gaming games?
Well, gaming games. We'll start there.
Gaming games, yeah. I loved Tekken and Mortal Kombat. The old school like Sonic, Street Fighter, Need for Speed, Grand Theft Auto, of course. Like, yeah, those are my jam.
Okay, so this all came full circle. But
yes.
What was, I guess, that moment where you realized you wanted to become an actor, since you said that you knew from very young?
I think it's because I always really enjoyed creating just worlds, and I had just a very carefree and vivid imagination. So I was able to tap into just not only just characters. So anytime I'd watch like my favorite shows, whether it was cartoons or like actual humans, I would like learn the lines of the show and repeat them back. Or like back in the day of VHS tapes, I'd like fill or like record certain shows and then go back and learn all the lines for one character and just like be in the scene.
You're acting
so I would
with the
do
TV.
that. Yeah, exactly. Like doing the exact like movements. So that, and then not only just as characters, but just worlds in general, like creating worlds that I wanted to live in and wanted to be in, that were, you know, not like our traditional normal world we were in. So yeah, I just kind of knew at a young age, like I want to do that like for a job. That'd be cool.
What about you, Daniella? So obviously now you are a YouTube creator. I know you recently finished university. You also have your not-for-profit community interest company. So you're doing all these things now, but did any of these sort of stem from childhood? Like, what were you like as a kid?
I was super awkward and quiet as a kid, actually. I was very, very shy, very socially awkward. I think I remember like some people would meet me and they would say to my sisters, because I'm the youngest of six, 4 girls and 1 boy, and like they'd say to my sisters like, does she talk? Because I was like so silent. I just followed behind them like just silently. So I was really quiet, and I just really struggled to kind of make friends sometimes. I think through primary school and secondary, like, you know, I was able to make friends. I feel like you just make friends from proximity and stuff, you know, like the people in your class or the people that you walk to school with every day, you just naturally make those friends. But I think definitely like going into university, I really struggled like in my first year when I was 19, which was like actually 5 years ago. But I've had like so many pauses and breaks and restarts. And I really, really struggled to find like a sense of community. And that's what led me to end up creating the not-for-profit, creating the events with Noir, to be able to create that community that I felt like I really struggled to find growing up. So it is like a full like circle moment. It isn't what I mean, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress, but I can't act. So when I tried to, and I was a bit good, but I can't act. Like it was, I don't know if it's like, no, I'm sure there's autistic actresses that are great, but I just don't know how to not show what I'm really thinking on my face. So like, you know how I'm like, you're supposed to pretend to be something, and my face is just reading like, why is she so close to me? Like, and it just wasn't really working for me. But I love drama. Though. I love like, I studied drama and literature. Like I've always been interested in sort of like productions and entertainment and all the things.
I feel like both of you have kind of like used elements from your upbringing to really, I guess, shape like the art that you create now and the communities that you want to build. And I kind of want to take some time to kind of highlight each of your stories so we can kind of get to know each of you and kind of how you came to be who you are today. So I'm going to start with Ilasiea. A lot of your work revolves around social justice themes. I know you also have passion for youth theater. So where did your early interest in the intersection of art and activism stem from, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think as a kid, I always sought out things or took interest in things that were revolved around justice or injustice and the why things were happening. I remember in high school is actually when I really got into like government specifically. I remember I was in like an AP government class and I was like, yeah, I want to go to law school and like I still want to act, but like I think that's kind of the lane I want to go in. So even in high school, I was taking like pre-law classes, and then in college, I ended up minoring in political science, majored in theater, film, and video production though. But like there was just always this like idea and concept that like art and the activism being one for social change were like there's an intersectionality between the two. That's not always the case. There's some actors, and it's no shade, that just like really love Shakespeare, like really love musicals and really love that. And I'm one that I'm like, no, I want to be doing work that like has a message, that has people thinking differently when they leave, wanting to have bigger conversations in their social circles. So yeah, I think it just started from a young age and then kind of going through high school, college. And then I just have gotten really fortunate to do a lot of work just in social justice and being very mindful of the projects I choose to do actually in that vein too.
Yeah, do you have any memory of some of like your first few projects that you felt like this really has like a message that really resonates with me?
I would definitely say there's a show I toured for like 6 years called Black with a capital B. And it, oh my gosh, it stemmed from a program for a theater I'm a company member with, which is Curious Theater Company in Colorado. And we had like a playwriting program for young playwrights to come in and just like, and like new playwrights, like people who have never written a play, just young people, high school, early college age, to just like workshop and write and get their voices out there. So this particular play spawned from that program, and the girl who wrote our play, Lamaria Amina, she was 22 when she wrote the play, very first play she ever wrote. And it was about just race and understanding, very heavily Black Lives Matter influenced, about police brutality, just a beautiful 2-woman play. Like 30 minutes, very short play, but the impact of it and the conversations we had after the show were always like an hour, because it really got people thinking and wondering and wanting to have deeper discussions about race. And so that's like one of the most impactful shows of my career. I originated the role in that. Again, it started as literally a reading, and then we've toured it to like just thousands and thousands of people, whether it was universities to housing authorities to we did one show, it was for like lawyers and judges, which that was like a crazy post-show discussion of just like laws and, you know, just so, and we had one where we had like a Black congregation and a white congregation come together, wanted to see the show and have some bigger conversations. So that's one that was like, oh my gosh, it's just like one of the most impactful shows in my career.
How do you think like where you were raised also kind of influenced the work and the shows that you decided to take on? So you obviously talked about Black with a capital B, but yeah. I know that you were the first Black Sleeping Beauty in a show that you did in 2018 with Denver's Children's Theater. Yeah. I also know that you had a show called Acting While Black in 2020 when, you know, all that chaos was happening. So yeah, like how does like being from Denver, or are you from Denver, first of all?
Yeah, I'm from Denver.
Okay, so you're from Denver. How did that influence, I guess, sort of the roles that you've decided to take?
That's very interesting because like when I think about Denver as a whole, it's actually shocking the amount of amazing social justice shows I've been able to do. Because on the other side of that, I've had so many problems in Denver in the theater industry and performing arts industry that were like very traumatic, to be honest. But as far as Sleeping Beauty, that I remember was like, I was mind blown that I even got cast in that show. It was a theater, Denver Children's Theater, that I love working with, like one of my favorite theaters ever. And I remember they had me audition for the show, and I was like, I actually was like, no, I don't want to audition. You're going to cast me as like the witch or something. Like, I don't want to do it. I never like thought they would even be considering me for Sleeping Beauty. So I just remember coming into the audition, and they kept having me read for Sleeping Beauty. And I'm like, why do I keep getting the sides for that character? And like, I was just like, not even connecting the dots. And then I remember getting cast, and I was like, as that role, and I was just like, oh my God, like this is, oh my God. Like it just like such a big deal for so many reasons, especially to see diversity and representation on stage. And it was the same year Black Panther came out. So like, oh my gosh, just what it meant for Black and brown kids, especially Black kids, just seeing our superheroes, but then also to see me on stage as a princess, to show like, you know, doesn't matter your race, color, shape, size, abilities, like we need to just see representation on stage. So it was a huge deal.
Yeah, I definitely love, you know, seeing the different types of roles you've taken throughout your career. I feel like it's definitely helps, for example, for young kids to see a Black actress either playing over a lead, playing a princess, or Yeah, just having that representation on stage. I feel like, we have all these conversations about having more representation in the film and TV industry, but also the performing arts industry, in like theater. That is just as important too. I want to also touch on how you have kind of implemented your passion for youth theater into your work as well. So where did your, I guess, interest in being an educator and also making theater for young audiences, where do you think that originated from? And yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think I just kind of fell into it, and I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it. Because I know in college was my first like tiptoeing into, I had like this whole scholarship that I was offered, and it was called Arts Bridge, and it was to literally like create like performance pieces with like elementary school kids and middle school. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I don't know. But I've always worked with kids. Even as like a high schooler, I did Big Brothers Big Sisters. I was a big sister. And so I'm always drawn to the youth, even when I was a youth. So I was like, all right, well, okay, it's arts and kids, you could do that, like try it. So it was through that scholarship where I was like, oh my gosh, I really actually enjoy this. And then after college, I immediately started my own company called Lele's Acting Jam. And it's, I started coaching kids from 5 to 18. And I still run that programming now. And I always tell my students, like, I'm a better actor because I'm an educator, and I'm a better educator because I'm an actor. So I don't even see myself ever doing one without the other. And then I love, like, whenever I'm doing projects with students too, young people, where they're like, we're devising work. So like they're creating their own work and things that are important to them. Or when I'm specifically working on projects where I can make sure the youth voice is a part of the project. So I did a project called Colorado 2020, and it was like a whole docu-theater production basically, and we did it in 2020. What was great about that project, it was like we interviewed like 50 different Coloradans, from healthcare to police officers. But of the 6 people on our creative team, none of them worked with youth. And I was like, hey, we should get the perspective of young people right now and how they're feeling about 2020 and like COVID, virtual school, racism, George Floyd, like all these things that we're asking the adults. I'm like, I think we should get kids. And you could tell everyone was kind of nervous. And I'm like, I got this. Like, I'll be talking to my kids all the time about this stuff. And like in the ways that, that's age appropriate. So the youngest student we had, one of my students on that project, was 5. And not only were they able to be interviewed about some of these social justice topics around the time, they then also got to play themselves and get a check. So I'm like always like thinking about the youth and like their progression in the arts.
Securing the bag, you know?
Exactly. So I was like really proud of that, because otherwise, again, had I not been on that 6-person creative team, we wouldn't have had young people on that project. So yeah, I'm just really, really passionate about that.
Do you think there's something about young people or young actors that is different, I guess, like from working with adults?
Oh, absolutely. Young people are just so much more open, and they are unfiltered. If something's not working, it's not working, and they will tell you. And I appreciate that honesty. Adults, we like to tiptoe, and that's okay. We're kind of conditioned to do that, whereas young people are still in this stage of like wonder, and they're not feeling like they're being judged or there's a wrong answer. And even if they are, it's easy for them to bounce back. So, and I just I work with so many students that are like, have 0 experience, to students I have kids who are on TV shows that I still coach, and in commercials and professional theater. So it just runs the gamut, and all of them are different, and all of them are just brilliant and talented and just on their own journeys. And I really love to just like be a part of it.
I do want to talk a little bit about your internationally published essay. So you did a master's program, I believe it's Environmental in Social Arts Practice. And you wrote an essay called Why Are There No Great Kids of Color in the Performing Arts? So tell us a little bit about what inspired that essay and some of the topics that it explored. Because I feel like the title in and of itself is very, I don't know the word, like attention grabbing. So yeah. Tell us more about that, like what inspired that.
Yeah, it was actually like inspired by another essay, like there's like a few in the series, like why are there no great Black art dealers? Why are there no, now I'm forgetting what some of them were that I was inspired by, but they're in the essay. But it's literally a rhetorical question, because like, of course there's great kids of color in the arts. And yeah, during my program, Patrice Cullors was our faculty lead, but also the founder of the program, and she's co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Has since stepped down, obviously, but yeah, and just that program in itself was like, oh my gosh, it was just like one of the most affirming and necessary programs and experiences I could have had, especially at the time. And the essay kind of spawned from, like, I was already writing something prior to my program just about, honestly, just a really traumatic work experience I had with like one of the largest arts organizations in the state. And not only just there, but like in so many different teaching capacities where I was noticing like, hey, I'm trying to like make this space better, because what's really unfortunate in those spaces is like you're just always met with resistance. And at this particular space, I was the only Black female educator on top of it. So it was like everything was like combative for no reason. Like, I'm not trying to be combative. I'm just trying to help, illuminate some of the problems and like prevent some of my kids who are coming back or going home crying because today is the day they learned they were different at this organization because of what other kids are saying, racist comments and actions that are happening to kids, that are happening to myself. And you're just like, oh,
can you provide any like examples of some things that happened?
Sure. Yeah. And I have a couple of in the essay, but like I had like, and it's still crazy to think of this day, but I remember a 5-year-old in my class. Long story short, we were like coloring something, and like this kid kept using the color black, and he was saying like he loved black in general. Black was his favorite color, like actual black and not brown. And this little girl kept being like, well, I just don't think you should color with that. Like, no, you shouldn't. I don't think you should use it. And I'm always like giving the kids the benefit of the doubt, like let them say what they need to say, see where it's going. And then like it just started getting kind of weird because he was like coloring people as well. And then out of nowhere, then she goes, well, I just don't think you should use that. Like, I don't appreciate brown skin. And I was just like shocked in the moment that she even said it. And I remembered like the day before though, we were playing a game where I was like needing to hold their hands. And I remember the little girl kept like not touching me. So now in the moment, I'm like, she doesn't appreciate brown skin. No wonder she didn't want me to touch, like all these things are going through my head. And I remember I had like a white, teaching assistant, and he was just like immediately was like, we don't talk like that. And like he like jumped in and he was like, was that okay that I even did that? And I was like, yes, because like you look like her, so it's actually more prominent coming from you to be like, hey, not all of us think that way, that look this way. And and in my opinion, I'm like, if that's what you're learning at home, okay, but we don't do that here. And I remember one thing I said to her right after she said that, I was like, well, I have brown skin. And you could tell her little face just kind of glazed over, like she didn't even connect to what she was saying. But like, again, a 5-year-old even using the word appreciate was like, I don't appreciate brown skin, is like, okay, that's next level. And so unfortunately, like after that incident, like there was just more offenses that then happened and carried on throughout the rest of the day because of that comment, and kids like recognizing they look different. The very next week I had a student who was told, you can't sit with me because I'm allergic to black people. And that was middle school. Like things kept happening at this organization. And there's one thing where like, sure, you don't fault the kids for what they're saying, but you do have a responsibility to tell parents and to like, I always say it as like racist comments and things like that are just as bad as physical violence. So if there's consequences for punching someone on the playground, you're in the office, we're calling home, it needs to be the same for insensitive and racist comments, because those actually stick longer. Like a punch in the face, you're gonna heal. You'll probably remember it happened and it sucks, but like those racist remarks, those are what like, they stick to you your entire life. You remember where you were, how old you were when that happened. And so these were some of the conversations. There was plenty of other things that happened too, but these were just some of the conversations I'm trying to have with, higher ups at that organization. And it was hard because, again, in my own company, I would have already talked to parents. Like, we're already dealing with this. But when you're working for, like, a machine, as this organization was, it's like you have all these steps and hoops to jump through, and then they're gaslighting you and then making you feel like you're crazy. And, like, there was, like, a lot of just repercussions at that organization as an actor that I was experiencing because of me constantly sticking up for my students and for things that were happening to me, and me telling them like, hey, you guys are reminding me that I'm different here. Like every time I bring something to you, you understand how that's making me feel. That like they threatened my job. They told me stuff like, we can't have you teach across the street because we need to keep you close and in the building. Like that just was like bondage, slavery. Like, who are you talking to? And like, nah, I just wasn't with it. So that is an organization that I ultimately left. Actually almost pursued legal action against them as well. Like it was intense. And so that was stuff I was already working out for like a while, like a good year or two. And just, it was just a really traumatic experience for so many reasons. And so by the time
I was going to say, how has like that sort of experience, as well as other experience throughout your career, kind of influenced why you wrote your essay and some of the topics that it explores related to inequity and access in the performing arts for educators and students of color?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to get to, is that kind of everything I was like trying to work out with that particular situation. I realized like later it was like, okay, this is a bigger conversation. This is a bigger thing that I'm experiencing, not only there, but in other places, but my kids are experiencing. And it really inspired me to write that particular essay in a different way. So I had already, you know, again, written different things about that experience and other experiences. And I was like, what is this common thread? And so in the essay, I talk about just inequities in the arts for young people of color. So whether that's access to arts programs, to just like hurdles and challenges in predominantly white spaces, whether that is an arts organization or that's an arts school, or if it's an arts class, whatever that is. And then challenges for educators of color who are in those spaces as well, when they speak up and like, then they end up leaving, and then the students end up leaving. And it's like, well, what's the culture you are giving here? Like it's just toxic. So the goal for writing that essay was just to kind of like illuminate some of those issues and challenges and hurdles, and in a way for people to reflect, especially those who work in arts education capacities, and how to be better and show up better for students of color, with material that's presented, with taking ideas from students from different backgrounds and different cultures. And then I also even talked about just like why utopias are super important. So students of color being able to be in spaces just for them. And I've been blessed to be able to work in those capacities too, where like I've done, I was like a director of curriculum for a camp specifically for young Black girls, and like we were devising some different theater pieces, and I was like, well, what do you want your show to be about? And they're like, well, Black women's beauty and women's rights, and just all these things that they couldn't say in like their regular public school, because their teachers would be like, well, we can't do that, and do we have enough, you know? It was just a space where they felt seen and heard and affirmed, and we just did a whole show on exactly what they wanted, wrote it from scratch, devised it. It was amazing. So just the essay kind of explores a lot of those different themes, and I've gotten so much great feedback from it. I speak at conferences nationwide about it, so like South by Southwest Education Conference and Woodruff Arts Educators Conference in Atlanta, and just like all over. So I'll speak about it, and then I also do like facilitate workshops around it as well for educators. So and just people from different backgrounds and careers, even not even just in professions, not even just in the arts, have reached out of like, hey, this is something I'm experiencing in my corporate America job, and like it's different. It's not about like students and young people, but it's like these are things that I'm navigating in my workplace as well. So I just really love that it had an impact in the way that it did.
Definitely. I feel like the topics can be related to a lot of different fields, even if not just the performing arts. We've talked about some of your major career moments, and one of your most recent projects is being in voicing Diamond, the student activist in the video game Life is Strange Double Exposure. So this is a game that I actually played on my channel, but I want to know, you know, I feel like you and Diamond have a lot of parallels, especially creating art that matters. I know that's one of her lines. So how did that opportunity to play Diamond come about, and kind of what drew you to her character?
It came about, I just got the audition for it one day, and it's crazy because it's like very sentimental. I auditioned for it. It was just purely voiceover on Martin Luther King Day in 2022. And I just remember I had done the audition that morning, and sadly that became like one of the worst days of my life, because a few hours later, my grandma ended up in the hospital. And her husband was like about to enter hospice care. I think she just was really stressed. So she just like ended up in the hospital, had a major stroke. And then we get to the hospital and we find out like she wasn't going to make it. 2 hours later, we're still in the hospital, like trying to process that she's not going to make it. And my step grandpa passes as well, same day. And I'm like, game aside, in hindsight, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that audition in the morning, because had all those events then transpired, I would not have done that audition. And so I just remember like having this joy of completing the audition, and then just like this like horrific day, all hospital. And then sadly, as much as I love MLK Day, I'm always at the parades. It was like, I just like clinch every time MLK Day comes around now. But the beauty of that was I had done the audition. I think a week later I had a callback, and I remember one of my best friends was on the callback with me, and she was like one of the only people I had told what was going on. And I was just like a mess, but I just needed to kind of push through. I didn't tell, the directors of the game or anything like what had happened, and just kind of showed up professional as we do. And then maybe a couple weeks later, I found out I got cast in the game, and I was like, no way. Like,
was there something about her character that like kind of spoke to you?
Yeah, I think immediately just knowing that she was a student activist and a filmmaker, I was like, oh, yeah, I went to, like, literally, my program was theater, film, video production. I had some film school background, obviously an activist, artist, like, everything about her, I was like, yeah, that's pretty much me. I actually had someone ask recently, they were like, did they know who you were before they had you audition? Because, like, the parallels are crazy. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I think the character was already created, and then just like it just worked out that way. So yeah, Diamond's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely noticed a lot of the parallels in both of your stories, and so I felt like it was like the perfect casting. But yeah, so thank you for sharing a bit of your career history and kind of how you got to where you are today. I want to go to Daniella and get to know you a little bit more. So you talked a little bit about being kind of socially awkward growing up and kind of how that influenced the types of content that you make. So can you tell the audience a little bit about the types of videos you make and why you found talking about these topics necessary? All right, y'all, I gotta pause the conversation here. If you are enjoying Kwanzaa Unwrapped so far, make sure that you are subscribed. Hello? Y'all know the drill. Leave a comment below. Let me know what is resonating with you. I love reading comments, so let's engage down there. And if you're feeling generous this holiday season, consider a super thanks or becoming a channel member. I actually uploaded the full uncut panel discussion with no ads for my Monarch member tier because we ended up talking way longer than I anticipated, so check that out if that interests you. A few dollars really does go a long way to help me create more of the content that you find most impactful. I'll leave more information in the description below. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, so with my social awkwardness, I feel like that really influenced the work that I do with Neuro Noir. So like with creating the community and the events and whatnot. But actually, in terms of my content and what influenced starting my content growing up was I actually had a scholarship to go to boarding school for like 2 years. So I don't know what the equivalent would be in the States, but it was sixth form. So like year 11, I think year 12 and 13. I don't know what grade that, I don't know what the equivalent is, but it's essentially like high school kind of thing. So I was there, and I was like suddenly in this like private school space when I grew up in this like working class, background. And it was just such a huge contrast. And there was so many, it was outside of London as well, where I grew up, in like the countryside in England. And that experience was like, it was like a crash course on like Britain's racial issues. Like I had no idea that like it was such a big issue because I grew up in London. I would go to Brixton and Peckham, there's black people everywhere, and it's like so much culture. I see Ghanaians like every time I'd go to with my family to church on Sunday, and then all of a sudden I'm in a town where I'm quite literally the only person that looks like me. Like I could count on my fingers when I'd go into town how many black people I'd see, and sometimes it'd be like one or two, sometimes it'd be none. Like if I'd go in on a Saturday and I see one black person, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I actually remember it for the rest of the week because I haven't seen a black person in a while. So it was just a complete contrast to what my experiences were like when I was in secondary school, and it was something that I really struggled with actually. I think at first I thought, oh, it's fine, like I've been to, my primary school was predominantly white, so I've been around a lot of white people, I'm sure I can it'll be fine, and then some comments started to get real, and it's a bit different when you're in a town where you're a minority than when you're just sort of like in one school where you're a minority. When you're in a town, it's like there's literally no one you can go to. Like it's not like, oh, just down the road. There's literally no one you can go to that understands how you feel. I had like I mentioned, like I was a theatre kid, and I think I was auditioning for a musical. And I was asking like who got each role, and then this is someone that I was close to as well. She was just telling me, about like the characters and all these things, and she was like, yeah, so um, the main character's like half Egyptian, and I was like, oh, okay, like half Egyptian. I think it was Arabian Nights or something, and she was saying like where the character was from. And I was like, oh, like half Egyptian and what? And then she was like, just like half Egyptian. I'm like, yeah, half Egyptian and what? And then she's like, oh, she's like normal, just like
Yeah.
just normal, half Egyptian and
Not.
and I got like, some moments where you just think like, I didn't even know what to do because I want to be like, what do you mean by that? And I said it. And then
Normal.
the people around me, because I'm, yeah, normal. Because I'm like around predominantly white people, and even the people of color that were there had been around these white people for so long that it's almost like they don't want to be the one to say it. Like so they've kind of had to act like all of this is okay because otherwise they wouldn't fit in. So it's like years of them just trying to blend in and fit in. So I've just come all of a sudden and I'm like, you can't say that, like that's not okay. And it was just seeing how uncomfortable everyone gets and all these things. It's like I almost understand why those other people of color were just like silent for so long, because it's like, if this is where you live, it's not like it's like secondary school you get to go home or high school you get to go home. It's boarding school. Like we live here, we sleep in the same house as these girls, so it was just lots of experiences like that which were just like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And I didn't know, I was like I got there when I was 16 and I left when I was 18. I didn't know how to articulate my experience. I really struggled to even put it into words to say how it felt, and I was just like really, really miserable while I was there. And it didn't help that I already like wasn't the best of social cues and stuff, so I didn't know how to adapt to some people know how to adapt to certain social situations. I already struggled with that, so all of those things combined meant I had a really, really hard time. And even when I wanted to speak to someone about it, I didn't know the words. Like I didn't know what a microaggression was. I didn't know I didn't know the terms. I literally didn't know the language and the terminology. So I made it my mission after I left that school and came back to London to be able to like research so I can find the language to explain what I just experienced, because it was just a feeling at that point. I couldn't say like this place was racist, because I'm like, well, I don't know if it is racist. I feel like it's just like it's like a little, and it is, but I just didn't know like that there's like different divisions of racism. Like racism has siblings and all these things. So I think I just became really, really passionate about researching and like just reading into articles on JSTOR and like what research is out there to explain these types of experiences. And that just became a passion for me. I went to like the Black Cultural Archives when I went back to London. I just like had like this huge desire to understand my Blackness and understand how to speak up for myself and how to articulate those experiences, understand more about race in Britain, because it was just not something that I had even thought was an issue until I had left London. And I think a lot of people in big cities who haven't had this experience would similarly say, oh, England doesn't really have a race issue, but Britain's fine. As soon as they leave that big city and go into, which is the majority of the country, like other areas, they suddenly realize, yes, it does, and it's really bad. So I just wanted to find the language, and sort of Town of Towiah became a platform where I was able to kind of use it as almost like a way to share the research that I was finding. Because a big thing for me was like, while I was in that school, I wondered like, why is it that predominantly white people go to these private schools in England? Why is it that even though from what I'm seeing, a lot of African children are really high performing in their schools in the UK, but then it doesn't reflect in how many of us are in these private schools, or how many of us are upper middle class or middle, are earning money and are, so I was just really like wanted to understand all of these things. And then that's where I started Town of Towiah. I researched into how sort of Black businesses and sort of the lack of support for Black British businesses, and then started to read into things about the essentially supporting like the Black economy and like buying from Black owned businesses and all of these things. And when I made that video, it's funny because when I made that video, I think it was 2019, and this was before sort of the Black Lives Matter movement became this like viral thing online where everyone was taking it seriously. So I was going into stores and asking like, oh, is this like Black owned? Is this Black owned? And they were like, why? Like, I don't understand the question. Now,
no, we're normal.
If I ask that, it's a norm. It's really not even strange. You see like even like white people, anyone is like making videos like, here's a Black owned brand, and they're not even Black, So it's like, it was just like a different time. And it's kind of crazy how that period of time really brought that conversation to the forefront, because I think I don't think a lot of us realized how, I'm sure you guys did, I'm sure a lot of people did, but I think some of us kind of underestimated the fact that a lot of these conversations were so like, swept under the rug until that huge like moment happened. So I just was like sitting on the video. I was like nervous to post it. I was like, no one's even going to watch this. And then all of these discussions started to happen and people were talking about the relevance of it. And I was like, why am I undermining the work I just did? Why am I undermining the voice? It doesn't matter if no one wants to watch it. This is clearly a very important thing. The fact that I decided to do that before it was a trend or before it was something that you'd get engagement for on social media. Like, I recorded this. I took out my time in the week to go to find these businesses, to go and promote them and make this video. And I just sort of like decided to like push myself and like gather the confidence to be able to post it. So yeah, my first video is like a mini documentary situation where I like go to different places in London and like speak to Black owned business owners. And yeah, so that's how I started my channel. And then from there, it just kind of branched into the video essays and social commentary, which is just in the spirit of like understanding and being able to articulate my Black experience, what it means to be Black. And I found the video essay format really worked quite well with me in terms of like, I enjoyed the structure, I enjoyed watching them. So that was just sort of like what I went into. So yeah, so that's how I start. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure anymore, but yeah.
Definitely. I really resonated when you said that like your kind of start with Town of Towiah was basically trying to like understand, your experience. I know I can definitely relate to that as someone who grew up in multicultural, but I would say it's more multicolored area.
Yeah.
I like what you said about like racism having siblings, and that you don't necessarily have to be called like a slur or derogatory term for something to still be a form of racism. And I think I definitely relate to like, wanting to understand my experience as a Black person and my Blackness and identity. I'm also curious about what is the meaning behind your channel name, Town of Towiah? I feel like I've heard you explain this before, but let us all know.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, and I wish I had this like really deep, like amazing explanation that just like takes everyone back. It's actually my family name, so it's sort of like house of like the family that I'm from essentially. So it's just sort of like I'm of Ghanaian descent, and it is a Ghanaian name, and I feel like it kind of ties into the fact of me trying to be like understand who I am as a Black person, value that and appreciate that. And like one thing I even talk about on my channel a lot is this idea of like acting white and being whitewashed. Because when I came back from boarding school, my voice had changed, the way I dressed had changed, so much had changed. And people did not hesitate to point that out. But I had experienced that my whole life because I went to a primary school that was predominantly white. And then the area I grew up in was a predominantly white area, but it was close to a lot of like culturally Black areas in London. So it was near Brixton, it was near Peckham, it was near like so I had been called whitewashed a lot because of my friends were like weren't always people of color, and I think it was something where it would be little things, even just like my interest in expanding my vocabulary would be things that people would call me whitewashed for. So the name Town of Towiah as well kind of falls under this idea of like, this is my culture, like I am a Black woman, it doesn't matter like what my interests are, whether it's because I go to uni and read books, it doesn't make me any less Black. It's almost like this is like unapologetically Black environment, that platform that I'm building. But yeah, I wish there was a more fun explanation, but it's a family name, so yeah.
I mean, I always think it's interesting to see how people have come up with like their channel names or their brand names. I feel like even if it seems simple, I feel like there's still significance to that. I also want to talk about Neuro Noir and kind of how that came to be. So you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the conversation, but can you tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that you faced throughout childhood and also in your adulthood that eventually led you to seek an autism diagnosis, and then kind of how your life sort of changed after that diagnosis?
Yeah, so I mentioned like, just that sort of like awkwardness and whatnot. And I just always had this feeling of like not fitting in, but also not understanding why. Like I couldn't pinpoint what it was that I struggled with. And one reoccurring issue that became really apparent in my first year of uni when I was like completely away from home, but also like forced into this like adult environment, was that I would often find when I speak to people, I understand the words, like English is the only language I speak, but I'd still not understand what they're saying. It's like there's something else that they're saying that I was missing. And I couldn't understand what it was. And then one day I just was like so tired of it, and I was just really, really depressed and in a really bad state. And I like literally just went on a Google tyrant, just typed in all the things that I struggle with, and was like really, I was like, why do I do this? Da, 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 da. And I just found all these YouTube videos, and I found one which was a woman talking about her autism, and she talked about nonverbal cues and how it's a huge part of communication, like, people's facial expressions and their body language. And that's something that a lot of people with autism don't naturally pick up on. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because I can hear what they're saying, but I feel like they're trying to say something else. And I couldn't understand why, because if I'm not picking up on it, I don't know I'm missing it, So after she said that, then I was like, that makes so much sense. And then I looked into, at the time, what I thought was Asperger's syndrome, but that's no longer diagnosed under the NHS because, well, Hans Asperger was a Nazi and he experimented on Jewish children, and there's a lot of issues with the terminology as well. It also undermines the experience of people that have that form of autism. So now it all is under the umbrella of autism. But I researched into it, Asperger's at the time, and just started to see all of these things that I could relate to so much. And I just thought, wow, like this. I really thought that I was the only one that struggled with all of these things. Now I know that there's like a whole world out there of people that understand me. So that led me to get diagnosed. And since my diagnosis, I've had so much support from my university, especially because they provide you with, in the UK, you get something called DSA, and they provide you with a mentor, so someone you could speak with every week, that helps you with your like social skills and development, which really, really, really helped me build my confidence, make friends. Now I have my beautiful community around me. Finally, I'm not socially awkward anymore. I make friends everywhere I go, but it took me so long to get to that point. And I don't think I would have got to that point without my autism diagnosis. So for me, it was actually a really positive, like life-changing thing to realize what it was that I was missing, so I knew what I needed to work on and get help for, essentially. So the work that I do with NeuroNoir is we hold social events for Black neurodivergent women and queer people, and we do like sip and paints or like games nights, crochet workshops, all the things, and it's kind of like that part where, okay, I'm diagnosed, or okay, I'm pretty sure I know I have this, I have XYZ, but I still don't have the social skills. What now? Which is the situation I was in. NeuroNoir kind of provides that space. Be like, well, now you can come and make friends here, because if parties aren't your thing, or, you don't know how to initiate a conversation, come and find a load of people that can relate to that. And, just like laugh, get along with them. And it's just a very lighthearted, wholesome space where you don't have to come and have a deep conversation about, like your neurodivergence. Just come and make friends. Like, just come and meet people who want to make friends too, So that's like our whole thing. And it's just been really, really, a really beautiful start. Like, we started off in London, then we were in Manchester after a few months, and then we're going to be in Essex, and I'm looking to start in Birmingham as well. So we're going to different towns in the UK, which is just so wholesome. I love it so much I could cry, honestly. Like, it's the community like I wish I had when I was growing up. So it's really beautiful to see that it's like, come to life. I don't even know if I've answered the question at this point. I think so. I'm not sure. I think I did. Yeah, well, that's why I started NeuroNoir. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think, like, as you've been talking, I feel like your kind of like journey to understanding yourself and making sense of your identity, I feel like has really shaped, I guess, the different things you've done, your different various endeavors. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. And I feel like there's such like a narrow view of what people think like socializing should look like once you're like an adult or a young adult. And like you said, with people who are neurodivergent, sometimes those overstimulating environments or those aren't really necessarily the most, accommodating, for people who struggle with that. So I definitely think it's so important that you're kind of creating this environment. Why is it important for you to kind of be vocal, not only just about your autism diagnosis, but also being a Black woman, or even for the queer community? Like, why is it so important to kind of make these distinctions that I'm not just autistic, but these are also equally important parts as well?
Yeah, so for me, it's just essentially about representation. I know that's like such a buzzword, but honestly, I started when I was like sort of creating like the plan of why I wanted to start NeuroNoir and all these things, I wanted to be able to have research to support everything that I was saying, because it may be my experience, but I wanted to know, is this like a lot of other people's experience? Is it just am I an anomaly? And when I looked into it, it's particularly with autism and ADHD, Black people are extremely overrepresented in the stats. Like Black women are the most to have ADHD in the UK, and by NHS records. And it's insane that so many of us are neurodivergent and we don't know it, you know? And it's the fact that in our community we don't talk about this thing that we predominantly have in a country that we're a minority in, you know? So it's obviously an extremely significant thing to us, but it's just something that isn't discussed enough. A lot of us feel like there's a look for autism, or there's a look for, you know, certain forms of disabilities. And it is really important to just really express the fact that that's not the case. I think the more I talk about my experiences, the more I put myself out there and talk about it, it encourages other women to like, oh, maybe that's what it is that I've been struggling with. And it's not just about sort of like what a lot of people think neurodivergent diagnoses are, which are just like things for attention. It's also a lot of people are struggling with their mental health and are depressed or extremely anxious, and they think it's just that they're depressed. They think that they just are, you know, have an attitude or a bad mood, and really they have an underlying form of neurodivergence that they don't know about. And if they knew about it, they could get the support that they needed. But because people just say, oh, this person has an attitude, or she's just difficult, and it's not something that's like as talked about in our community, it just completely flies under the radar, and a lot of people really struggle with their mental health because of that. So I think being able to be as vocal as possible, to really put it out there and allow people to be able to understand, like, you know, you're not alone in this issue. It could be this, it could be that, you know, have you considered researching into this? There are people that look like you that had this. I think that really makes a huge difference. And even with the differentiation of queer people and why it's for women and queers is like, you know, to me, it's apparent for the women part, but I realize like not everyone. So I know you guys would definitely know, especially you've worked with children, so you know. But like, one thing a lot of people don't recognize is with autism, you know, most of the research is done predominantly in white men, basically. So a lot of women go under the radar, and then there's that extra layer of being a Black woman, where often we're dismissed in medical fields, in healthcare, because when we're struggling, it's seen as us being overreacting or dramatic, or that we're strong and we will be able to deal with it. So these are all issues that we face. So those intersections are really important. And in terms of being queer as well, there's actually a Cambridge study that says that autistic people are most likely to be queer, which I think is quite funny because every autistic person I know is queer. But it's like it's just a sort of like lighthearted like fact. But it's all of these intersections are like quite significant to the fact that there's so many of us, but we're also so underrepresented. So that's why it was really important to me to kind of make the distinction between these forms of identity. So yeah.
I definitely think kind of like the work that you do both kind of like exemplifies this idea of like just creating a welcoming space, like you're welcome here, you know. Just here's just a more like low stress like environment just to make friends, or even with your work, Ilasiea, like showing that Black women or Black kids like have a place in the performing arts if they want to become an actor, if they want to, you know, pursue theater. I feel like, you know, creating these spaces where it's safe and it's welcoming is just like so important for that. So I formatted this episode based around this idea of like being the change. There's this great quote by Barack Obama that I love, which is, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And I feel like both of your stories kind of embody like elements of this quote or this sentiment. So I just want to throw it out there. I'll start with you, Ilasiea. Like, does this quote resonate with you? And if so, how so?
Yeah, definitely. I think, can you say it one more time? Because I want to like
digest it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I can hear it one more time.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek.
Like, that's it, you know? Like, I resonate with that so much. And I'm thinking in terms of like when you want a change, or you want a certain environment, or space that you're in to be different, you can't always look to other people, right? Like you can't look to other people for like validation. Yes, there you can look to people to help you collaborate or to help facilitate the change, but like you really have to show up as you. There's something to, I think, even in the term activism, of being active in that change and not seeking it out in someone else. Oh my gosh, when I think about like some of the experiences I've shared with you both of just some of my previous workspaces in the arts and like hoping they would do the right thing. And it's like disappointed every time. And especially, you know, again, predominantly white spaces that like they don't understand. They can't facilitate the change because they have no idea what it's like to be me. They have no idea what it's like to be these young kids of color who are like humiliated when these comments are being made to them, or these what did I say, well-meaning observations or the microaggressions. Like they can't. So like you can't expect them to change, even though I love the saying where it was like, I think it was Amanda Seales who said something like, white people are always like, how do we fix racism? And it's like, well, y'all the ones created it. So like, why are you asking us how to fix it? Like you, right? But there is something to like, you just like are not fully capable without the assistance of the people you are harming. Like you can't be, because you just don't think you have, you just don't have this accountability factor. So oftentimes, so sorry, this is going around it, but I just think, yeah, when you really think about being the change and being the conduit for that, and not necessarily seeking that out in others, it's like, it's almost like seamless. It comes with hardships, of course, and challenges, and like, Lord knows I've had so many, but like, there's something about walking into a space, any space you're in, and having your integrity and operating in a way that just elevates the space and the space that you're in, or the community you're trying to build, or just what you're trying to achieve. If you are just walking that walk and talking that talk and truly authentically living that, again, you can't, it's you. It starts with you. You can't even say, hey, can you make sure we do this? Like, no, I'm going to just make sure we do it. And I'm going to tell you what we need to do differently. And you can take that, take it as you will. Maybe you'll choose to elevate and be better or not. But like, I know, especially like in a lot of the situations I've been in, I've gotten so many apologies like over time, or people trying to come back like, hey, remember when that thing happened? And it's like, yeah, it would have been nice if you spoke up and had my back then as like another white person or whatever, because maybe I wouldn't have got the brunt of like all the BS. But like, I know for a fact that every space that I've helped elevate or raise some awareness and try to, you know, uplift and be better for others, I left the place 100 times better. Even if I left the place altogether, if I'm no longer there, something changed because I was there. So I think that is just being the change. And also I always tell people, especially Black artists, kind of what I said about like even the roles we take. You don't have to be, just because they're doing a show and then this character needs to be a slave, you don't have to do the show. You don't have to say yes to those types of things. And again, it's a double-edged sword, because again, a lot of actors are like, I just want to work. I don't care. I want the credit on my resume. I want the paycheck. But it's like, if we start being more deliberate and intentional with the work we're doing, then certain work isn't going to be done anymore. Certain stereotypes aren't going to keep being portrayed. That's a part of, again, being that change. Like it starts with like the decisions we make on a
micro level.
Yeah. Exactly. So sorry, that was a very long answer, but it hit a little different when you read the quote again of like, oh my God, there's so much there. So yeah. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I feel like there's so much to unpack there. But I want to also ask you, Daniella, like, does this quote resonate with you? And if so, like, how so? And I can read it again if you need.
No, it really does. Especially like, you know, I'm coming from a very traditional Ghanaian family, you know, like I remember I told my mom that I had autism, and then she was like, oh, don't listen to those white people. They don't know what they're talking about. And I was like, no, this one's real. Like, I was like, I know some diagnosis, like I know, but this one is legit. And then she was like, okay, just make sure you pray, okay? And I was like, no, it's not like, and then, but after I explained it to her, I remember, because imagine this is how she sees if someone is autistic. She's like, oh, you know, it's this, you know, horrible thing that the person probably didn't pray enough and all these things. And I started to explain to her some of like the positives of like autism, like this, you know, it means like I'm hyper attentive to certain things, which actually makes me a lot more academic in a lot of ways. Or, you know, this is actually some of the strengths that I have because of this. These are some of the, you know, famous figures that have autism and were extremely intelligent. And she was like, oh, okay. And now all of a sudden, when she hears autism, she's like, oh, this is a good one. But it's like without me having that moment of just being like, okay, look, I know I come from this kind of family. I'm not going to just be like, oh, she doesn't agree with it, I'm moving on. Why don't I explain it to her? And you really never know. Obviously, there are some things where that can be a lot harder to create that change, but to be able to kind of stand strong in what you are, double down, you'd be surprised if sometimes in Alasia's case, for example, it might be later on, and I've had that as well, be further down the line where what you said to them resonates in some time, but you really would be surprised by the impact that you make by essentially being that change that you want to see. And even if you do it for no one else, just do it for yourself, just so that you don't end up carrying that bitterness of being like expecting change from other people. If you start to do it for yourself, you'll feel so much lighter to know that it's being done and you're the one that's doing it. Like, you know, even if you feel like people don't deserve for you to be, you know, like doing their dirty work, just do it for yourself. You'll feel so much lighter, honestly.
That's like the epitome of like freedom, you know, just being able to embody like who you truly are and what you want to see changed, whether it's in your own environment or society, you know, like more generally.
I love you tying it to family too, really quick, because I think even in that sense, like when we're our generation, like breaking those generational curses and family and stigmas of like mental health and all these different things, it's like it just is us being that change in this new generation. And like Daniela said, having the language, being able to like lay it out in a different way, that it's like, I'm just showing up as me and here's all that encompasses me. And then mom starts to get it. And it's like, that was really cool to think of it in that way too, of just not just changing larger communities, but like your family and close loved ones. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah, change can start on many different levels. It doesn't necessarily have to be like you're the forefront of a movement to create change.
Yeah.
I do also want to talk a little bit about some of the challenging parts of being the change. I know, Ilasiea, you talked about this earlier, like having to endure not even just microaggressions, but just aggressions at, you know, working in as an educator and just in the field that you do. I can kind of tell that you want to be sort of like a positive representation for your students. You want to be kind of like the representation that you would want to see. But I know it's not easy. Being the change can come with complex like emotions and experiences. So can you touch a little bit about like, what are some of the challenges you have faced being the change?
It's interesting, like what Daniela mentioned earlier of like, I think that workplace the main one I have talked about was the first time I genuinely experienced systemic racism on a level that like there is a machine and people who are just like trying to literally gaslight you and make you feel like you are crazy and make you, I don't even want to say this out of my mouth, but almost like forget that you are Black. And like, I
don't see
had
color.
Never experienced it. What's that?
I said, I don't see color.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on that. Yeah. And that was really difficult for me. Like, I think I still have, like getting emotional now, I still have like a lot of trauma from that, like that insidious trauma that comes from, and especially what I've noticed the most is when it's people that like in Denver, because I didn't really say about like Denver is very white when you were asking like my upbringing, where I'm from, but like Denver has a lot of like fake woke white people too, and there's a lot of cities. I don't want to just call out Denver in case people are watching like, dang, she's just coming after Denver, but it's true. Where we have those places where there's the fake woke white people, and I always say they are sometimes more damaging than just flat out racist people. I'd rather you call me the N-word. I know where we stand. Okay. But it's those ones who are like, they think they like have everything right and the answers are right, and then the minute you just try to like help them along, like, hey, this was one of those things that was a little problematic. Oh my God, the deflection and all of a sudden they're the victim. I've literally had white women, yes, cry to me. Or I said something once where, I'm not even joking, I was doing a role play actor position, and this lady kept like being like, yeah, bring your culture. And she kept just saying shit that I was like, okay. And me and the other Black actors were like, okay. And I was like, so what do you mean by that? Like, I want you to explain. I don't want to just assume. And then at one point she was like, how do I ask you to be Black? And I was like, have you ever been on a job and someone asked you just how to be white? And she's just sitting there like, no. And then like trying to like help her along and like, yeah, so do you see how that is like not cool? And then she literally said to me, well, like, you're making me feel smaller and smaller. And I was just like,
that's what you did.
I was like, so like, exactly. So like consistently that was happening. And it was so bad. Like before Life is Strange. Like, I was at a point where I was like, I don't even want to do theater anymore. I don't want to be an actor. I don't want to be an artist. I'm tired. I'm getting frustrated. I was tired of showing up and being like having to do more work. I just want to come do my job. There's just shit that I'm like, other people don't have to deal with that just to do the job. And so I just think, to the question, like sometimes you just have to show up doing so much more heavy lifting, and then there's this expectation of the strong Black woman, and like, you got it, you're gonna be fine. But then if you show emotion or you're frustrated, ooh, you're just angry, and ooh, it's a lot. It's like a lot to carry. So I think just with those challenges, it's so important to like, it's cliche, but like the self-care is necessary. Like boundaries are necessary. Whatever that means to you, you know? So whether it's, like I said, taking a break from certain things and certain people, certain situations, saying no to certain things, like whatever that is, you just really have to self-care, but also, you know, continue to fight in the ways that feel, genuine and fulfilling for you. So like, it's like, okay, maybe these are the places, like you don't deserve my energy and efforts, but I'm then so grateful, like with my essay and other places where it's like, no, people are like, we know what you do and what you bring to the table. So you have one organization being like, you can't talk about race. We don't want, no, you're on disciplinary action. We're gonna threaten your job. And then you have another place that's like, that we know what you bring to the table and you're gonna make us better. And so you just take the good with the bad and like pour into more of that good than the bad. So
yeah,
sorry for the cussing too.
No no worries. I want you to express yourself how you know how it comes to you. But yeah, Daniella, so what are some of the challenges I feel like you have faced being the change? I know a topic you've talked about on, I believe, like your TikTok or your short form platforms is this idea of not like looking autistic and people kind of, having certain assumptions of what somebody who is neurodivergent or somebody who has autism looks like. So whether it's this example or another one that comes to mind, like what are some challenges you have faced being the change?
Yeah, I think that is one kind of reoccurring issue that I always come across. And I've kind of learned at this point to be able to kind of pick and choose my battles. I think that's one thing that I've learned from these challenges. But yeah, so a lot of people often say, it's funny because this is like a reoccurring conversation with people with autism. When we're growing up, we're weird and awkward. And people always like, why are you so weird and awkward? And then we get diagnosed and we're like, I'm autistic. And those same people are like, but you're normal, you're fine. It's like, but I thought you said I was weird and awkward. Like you said that. You made a point to say that, So it's just this like back and forth that's just so exhausting. And it's just at this point where I think after all of the kind of pushback I've got from all of the type of content that I do, whether it's talking about race, whether it's talking about diversity and, intersectionality and neurodivergence, I have learned there are some people who are not worth arguing with, especially, and this is for in the online realm, especially. I find that like my friend always describes, she describes people who are sort of like fascist or like bigoted. She says it's like a religion, it's a faith. You can't convince a Christian that their God is the devil. You have to, then you just have to leave them. Like there's some people you have to leave them because you will be arguing for the rest of your life, and all it will be doing is draining you and making you feel so negative. So that is something that's really, really helped me a lot because it can be so frustrating when people are online. They're like, why did you say this is for Black people? Why can't it be for all POCs? Or why isn't it for white people too? Or why isn't it for men? And all lives matter, basically. And then it gets sometimes when you first see it, you're like, okay, I'm an activist, so it's my job now to argue with this person and show them that they're wrong. And then I did it so many times that I started to realize, no, this person, they know they're wrong. This is just their faith. Like they believe this religiously, So it's not worth the time. So I've just learned to pick and choose my battles. Some people we come to resolve. Some people I can tell is worth the conversation, but others just, it's not worth. It's not worth wasting time. So yeah, definitely kind of like what you said, Ilasiea, setting boundaries is something that's extremely helpful just to protect our mental health. Because people just see you doing anything that is like for the greater good and they just get so mad. And I just don't understand why. But yeah, it just comes with the territory, honestly.
Some people just do not know how to mind their business and scroll past content that's not for them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I kind of want to end out this conversation of with this topic of why you guys do what you do, so I'll start with you, Ilasiea. We've talked a little bit about some of the, the challenges and the highs and the lows of, being a social practice artist and the many things that you do. We've talked about, some of the, blatant and subtle racism that you've experienced throughout your career. How have you made the performing arts for you, I guess, as a Black actress, and what's kind of the legacy you want to leave behind? Why do you keep showing up?
Why do I keep showing up? That's a really good way to put it. I keep showing up because art really, it's again cliche, but art literally has the power to change the world in all of its forms: music, poetry, dance, performing. I just think art can get to people's emotions and find a way for empathy to prevail in a different way. And I think the education component of that, of just having young people or even adults being able to find their voice in whatever form that is in the arts, because I really love, even though I'm specifically a performer, but I write and I direct and all that stuff, create, I'm always telling young people, we need artists who are our costume designers. So if you love to draw and that's kind of what you do and you're quiet, we need that in film and theater, in TV. We need our lighting designers. If the way you see the world is very different and it's through light, we need that. We need our writers to actually write the scripts and the text that we are saying. We need our directors. So just always making sure to talk about art as all encompassing, and not just be a performer and be in the spotlight, because that's not everyone's jam either. It's actually very challenging. So I like opening people's minds to what is possible, and even if that just means in a way that they can build their confidence in a different way. And then on top of that, with the activism, being able to just push for social change, if that is the example I gave with Lamaria, our playwright for Black with a capital B. You would have never thought writing a play in this 6-week program, it was going to tour for 6 years. You are now a published playwright. She's writing other plays. You don't even know until you tap into that. So I just really love being on that journey for myself, but being on the journey with others, and just seeing what's possible, and using their voice for whatever it is that they're passionate about.
What about you, Daniella? What is the most rewarding part about what you do? Why do you do what you do?
I think the most rewarding part is similarly, I was just writing because I'm really forgetful. So I was just writing a note of what I wanted to say. And as I wrote it, you were saying it. You was literally just said it right at the same time that I thought of it. But watching people find their voice is one thing that is just so special, because as much as we can do all the work that we can, but this isn't just self-work. It isn't just for us to be listen to our voice, look at us. It's about kind of creating impact, because we're not always going to be around, or we're not always, whether that's in this life in general, or in the space that we're in, and to be able to allow other people to be able to advocate for themselves and find their voice as well, so that there's that ripple effect from the change that you're creating. It's just something that's just so beautiful. And just having creating a sense of community as well is just something that honestly is, it's really hard to put. I'm so corny. I'm I could cry literally, but it's just something that's really hard to put into words. We are all social beings, and especially with the work that I do of neurodivergence, a lot of us tend to feel isolated or isolate ourselves because we don't have the social skills to be able to put ourselves out there, and to be able to create a space which changes so many people's idea of what friendship looks like, what community looks like. So many of us have friendship trauma and struggle to trust people because we feel other people aren't to be trusted. So to be able to create a space where people can let go of that weight and not feel they're alone, and really see so many people flourishing and improve their well-being, it's just such a beautiful thing. So that is why I love what I do. And if there's one thing that I'd want to leave, is to have other people that can find their voice and continue to facilitate and create that kind of space. So that's something that I love.
I love that. But yes, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I feel like this conversation was definitely very inspiring. I hope it encouraged, somebody out there to, be the change that they seek and do what they feel like they're called to do. So thank you again. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know I definitely did. So many gems were dropped. I will leave links to both of these guests in the description so you can follow them and support their work. And if this kind of content resonates with you, please hit that share button and send the video link to your group chat or to someone you think would really benefit from the discussion we had here today. This is a free way that you can support me and the show. But listen, child, Kwanzaa is not over yet. I am dropping fresh episodes every day this week, so make sure that you're back here tomorrow for more. My name is Asmara, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.